All right. Well, as we dealt with last time together, we dealt with the fact that we're just kind of getting a bird's eye view of what's going to be going on as we've finished off the first 9 verses, which is kind of part A. There's going to actually be 10 parts to the entire thing, but that's kind of part A. And then and then we started just looking over the material that we're going to be covering, kind of from the bird's eye view. And this whole section, and we could have gone on through chapter 2 and chapter 3, the first 4 chapters are just replete with the issue of what is wise, or what wisdom is, and what is foolish, or what a fool is. And that pitting wisdom against foolishness. And Paul's going to do some things with that are kind of interesting, but the basic idea of what is that's it's amazing that that right at the very beginning of this epistle, the very first real problem the Corinthians are having, of all the problems Paul could choose, it's this one. And this one is the one that is, if this was correct, there wouldn't be any of the others. This is the fountainhead of it all. This is the big issue, and that's because this is really the very core of what the policy of evil is all about today against us, which is the issue of competing wisdom. And that the wisdom of this world, and you got to understand, you've been born late into this game. This thing has been refined and refined and refined again and again and again through wars and upheavals and different cultures that come onto the scene and all of these kinds of things. And that thin, ugly line that runs through all of that wisdom goes all the way back to Babylon, and it goes back to Nimrod and to what was going on there. And it is shaped and molded countless countries and cities and cultures and religions and on through. And we come onto the scenes really late. This thing has been honed down to just an incredibly good working clock. It's got all of the mechanics of it finely tuned, finely honed, to be able to produce a desire in you for its wisdom and for what it offers in some measure, in some form. And all it has to do is get a toehold and a foothold. That's all it's got to do. And to be able to bring that passion and that zeal and that enthusiasm for your edification to just dampen it, to just bring it down a little bit, and then keep working on that, and then to try in so many cases to get it to be just as appealing as anything that the world has, and all of these things, and then pretty soon it's not as appealing as what the world offers. And so he's going right after the wisdom of this world, which had so many inroads into those folks in Corinth, and into you and me today. It still does. And we are not out of the woods when it comes to the effects of the wisdom of this world, the wisdom of men, and the way that the policy of evil uses that to try to thwart and stop the edification process from taking place. And so I really wanted you to appreciate that issue of how often this issue of fool and foolishness gets brought up, and what wisdom gets brought up. And as we dealt with on Sunday, let me just ask you. You tell me, what is a fool to God? And don't look at your notes. Just, what is a fool in God's sight?
Someone who doesn't even acknowledge what he has comes from God.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, right. Yeah, that's good. I just wanted to see how much stuck from Sunday, because you're going to have to be an expert with this. This isn't some passing doctrine. This is going to be something that you're wrapped up in all the time, because you're going to constantly have a value system present itself to you that tries to shame you, that tries to use every kind of power in its arsenal to try to get you to conform to it, and shame on you if you don't, and damned you if you don't, and dangerous to you if you don't, and all of these different kinds of things, and it's not going to get better, that's going to get worse. That attack and that pressure is going to constantly be there, and we deal with it every day. And I know I'm talking about myself. When I look through something like 1 Corinthians, I'm appalled at myself at how often I give in to that. How often even I seem to be able to say, well, that's church life, and that's church, and that's Bible class, but then there's these other things. No, there isn't. That's not it. And there's fear involved in it. Who are you going to make mad? Who are you going to alienate? Who are you going to make think? Folks, when we get done with this, there's not going to be any fear that you have of wanting to be and desiring to be the offscouring of this world, the filth of this world, and the offscouring of all things. This is designed to get all of that out and for you to really embrace without any kind of false bravado that you're a fool for Christ. And you're willing to walk away from a conversation with somebody either when the gospel is presented or when sound doctrine is presented to that person, rightly divided doctrine is presented to that person, and you're going to walk away and you're going to be looked at as the dummy, the idiot, the stupid one, and the fool. And as you walk away from that, there should be a grin on your face. Because that's exactly what should have happened. If they don't believe, I'm the fool. What is a fool? A fool is it's not just some class clown, joker, jester who takes everything too lightly. But as we looked at, a fool is one who acts contrary to sound wisdom. He acts contrary to the principles of sound wisdom, the practical principles of it. Those are dictionary definitions. But if you really want to know what God looks at a fool is a foolish son to God is one who is walking contrary. That word comes up again and again and again, any way you try to define it. A foolish son is walking contrary to the sound wisdom and the sound doctrine his father has given him. And here's the kicker. Therefore, if he's walking contrary to it, he's walking as if his father's wisdom didn't even exist. And what was one of the things we looked at in the first use of the word fool in any of its variations, which I think was foolishly? The very first time the word was ever used is back there in Genesis 32 with Laban and Jacob. And Laban tells Jacob he's acting foolishly, and he says something to him that indicates what God intends you to think about when the word fool or acting foolishly is used. He said, I have the power to do you hurt. And even though Jacob wasn't acting foolishly, the very first time that word is ever used, it's used in a way in which it implies if you are a fool, you're putting yourself in danger. And that's exactly how God looks at a fool today. You are putting yourself in danger. You're in danger of being taken in by the satanic policy of evil. You're in danger of all of those things we learned about that the evil man wants to do with you and that strange woman wants to do with you. You are in serious danger. A fool is one who acts contrary. He walks as if God's wisdom didn't even exist, and he is putting himself in danger. It's like I told you I heard an ER doctor say that almost every fool that came into his ER that was busted up, beat up, and broken up into a million pieces, he said most of those guys, the last words they said before they foolishly did what they did was, "Watch this." Yeah. And that ER doctor said that he's just a fool. He's a fool because he put himself in danger. All right? So one of the things that I wanted to do before we ended this and started looking at the outline, it's incredibly important to understand when we see fool pitted against wisdom, what is a wise man? What is wisdom to God? Wisdom in general is very easy. It's just using appropriately the information or the knowledge you've got, the appropriate application of knowledge to a situation. Wisdom and knowledge are not the same thing. Wisdom is the use, the appropriate use of the knowledge with the result that that situation turns out well and profitable and beneficial. But when it comes to what wisdom is to God, wisdom, this is something, folks, I try and drill it. We've seen this. I've said it last Sunday. We'll see more and more on this as the doctrine of our godly wisdom gets developed further in Paul's epistles. But it's already been stated to you that wisdom has enormous power to do something. It has power. And only God's wisdom has the power to do what man's wisdom wants to do and the wisdom of this world wants to do, but it can never do. And there's two main things. I discount the atheists. They're just nuts. And they'll never be a majority. The vast majority of human beings on this earth desire to worship God. They desire to worship God. There's some kind of God that they're worshiping, and their life is spent trying to please him or her or them or whatever it is. But that desire is going to always be there. All right? And there's two things with that man needs. One is he needs to not die. He needs the power of God to make it so that he doesn't die. He's got to deal with death. Every one of us, barring the rapture, every one of us right here tonight are going to deal with death. We're going to die. Our physical bodies are going to die. But we only die in that sense. In a very real sense, we'll never die. My inner man, my soul, my spirit are never going to die. And the great power of death and the fear of death and has all been broken. There's nothing fearsome about death because Christ is already resurrected from the dead. I have absolute proof that I'm going to live after death. And what I need, what I so desire, is eternal life. And nothing man's ever come up with can give man that. And by the way, when you talk to somebody about the gospel and you deal with somebody, you got to remember something. Their physical death really isn't that's one thing, but it's really not the real problem with death that they have. The problem is that something's going to happen after that. And God makes it very clear to you in His Word what that is. There's a second death. They don't want to face a judgment. I can't imagine being on the other side of that judgment and thinking, I had the opportunity to not deal with God on the basis of His justice, but on the basis of His grace, and I threw it away. Now I'm going to have to stand before His judgment. And I'm going to get the full account of what I deserve. So physical death isn't really the real problem that lost man has. There's a second death awaiting that lost individual and a judgment of God they're going to have to face. That's part of going back into Romans chapters 1 and 2 and realizing that's how they try to squirm out of everything. They want to get out of that judgment. So one of those things is being justified into eternal life. And there's a wisdom God has that is vested in His Word and in a message that He has given that has the power to give that and do that. And man's doesn't. Secondly, is the matter of pleasing God. And I use that expression because it is the epitome of what a son knows, is the delight of his Father, that he is pleased in him, how to please God. I mean, even the Catholics go through what they go through. You know, they give the money and they do all that and take all the sacraments and everything, and yeah, it's drudgery, and yeah, it's not taken seriously, but underlying all of that is, if I don't do that, God's going to be displeased with me. Well, God has some wisdom that makes it so that if you abide by that wisdom, you'll please him. And so really, this is just my working definition for what is the wisdom of God in God's sight. The wisdom of God is the wisdom vested in his word that has the power to produce, 1, justification unto eternal life, and 2, godly edification. Nothing else can do it. Nothing. And that's why I went back and saw that in Romans 1:16. For it is the power of God unto salvation. We saw it at the end of Romans, there in chapter 16 and verse 25. Now unto him that is the power to establish you, according to my gospel. God's vested certain power in the words that he gave to the Apostle Paul. Paul calls it my gospel, and vested in that is not just his wisdom, but it is the power of his wisdom to produce your establishment. Nothing else can. And nothing else will.